Good evening, everyone, and welcome tonight. We've got a very special event for you all. We're going to be discussing the topic of annexation and answering some of your questions live here on Facebook with Reuven Ben-Shalom, who we're very lucky to have with us all the way from Israel. I might hand it off to you, Reuven, to do a bit of an introduction, and then we might jump straight into the questions.
Sure. Well, first, some of you may know me because I visited Melbourne twice, and also Brisbane and a few other places. Amazing experience for me. So I see you all as family. I'm hoping to get back there as soon as possible when this COVID business is over. So thank you very much for the invitation. Short introduction about me, if you don't know who I am. I was born in the United States, moved to Israel when I was 4 years old, grew up on a kibbutz or moshav shitufi, if you're very knowledgeable about different settlements, and joined the Air Force when I was 18 and served for 25 years in the Israeli Defense Forces as a helicopter pilot, mostly in the same squadron, same helicopter. Retired in 2012. Besides flying, I did international relations, military cooperation, mainly with the United States, but then worldwide. So after retirement, I deal with cross-cultural issues, mainly strategic planning that has to do especially with the cross-cultural aspect of things. And here we are. I wrote, by the way, a column for the Jerusalem Post, and after about 50 columns, I moved on to other things, and very happy to share with you my insights and experience. But everything I say here today, of course, is only my personal experience and not an official opinion of an Israeli official.
Absolutely, and we thank you for taking the time out today to speak with us. I thought what we do is we jump in. I want to keep it as chronological as possible. The discussion that we're going to have. We've had quite a lot of questions sent in, ranging from, what does it look like? What does the plan look like on the ground currently? To, how is the plan impacting the current government and the relationship between Gantz and Netanyahu? What I thought we'd start with is maybe if you could discuss a little brief history about the topic of annexation pre-Trump, and then also post the Trump Middle East plan.
Okay, well, first, this is an extremely complex issue. And I know you can say anything in the Middle East is complex, but this is extremely difficult to understand. And a lot of it is still vague and unclear. It's also part of Israeli politics, part of our culture, that we have to pick up bits and pieces of things that are said and try to make something out of that. Let's remember that annexation issues have been raised here in Israel 2 days before elections. It happened in 2019 when Netanyahu said, I'm going to promote the annexation of Judea and Samaria. And then happened again in the last elections where, again, a couple of days before the election, suddenly we were hearing that right after the elections, we're going to annex the Jordan Valley and the northern part of the Dead Sea. So that's a very typical Israeli thing. I may sound very critical today, and that's the way I am. In general, I don't like politicians. I don't like politics, the business of politics. So again, it all mixes into something that we have to try to analyze and try to understand what they mean. So first, I want to make clear that when we talk about the annexation plan, it's not that we can go to the website and see what the plan is exactly. We're trying to guess. One of the reasons we're having this meeting today is because of that. Now, the history of annexation is extremely difficult to understand because the region, don't forget, shifts hands throughout history. And in general, by the way, a human disadvantage is that we somehow have in our imagination as if borders are fixed, situations are fixed. This is your country, this is my country, and now suddenly you want to annex this. How in the world did you think about this crazy idea? But this piece of land for thousands of years has been conquered and taken and annexed and conquered again. We ourselves have been here and have been sent to exile twice, right? This is our third attempt, which is why, by the way, be very careful when people talk about eternity, our eternal capital Jerusalem. Hopefully it's true, but remember that this is how history works. The Jordanians annexed, actually, de facto, they annexed Judea and Samaria at the time, and the world didn't do much about it. So, and back then, was that legal? Was it not legal? So remember that after we took Judea and Samaria in the 6-day war, since then, the area is occupied. Now, I know, especially Israelis, we have a big problem with the word occupied. when someone says that's the illegal occupied territory, we Israelis say, don't call it occupied. This is my homeland. I can dig in the ground and find a piece of clay, and my young son can read it in Hebrew. This has been ours for millennia. It's our ancestral homeland. That's all true. But we today are going to try to be a bit more practical and see it as it is, that in fact, since we seized this territory in war, legally it's occupied, held, in dispute. Maybe that's a better land in dispute. And throughout the last few decades, once in a while, the issue of annexation has been raised. And when we talk about the history of annexation, let's just see it as it is. We have the Golan Heights, and don't forget, we may see the Golan Heights as an integral part of Israel. Some parts of the world do not. Even the United States, till recently, did not see the Golan Heights as part of Israel. All of a sudden now Trump decided that it is. So yay, it's ours now. This is my first mentioning of Trump, by the way. There will be a few other points here, and you'll see that I have a problem with this administration, but let's try to break it down into the issues themselves and not make it personal. So we annexed, in fact, in 1981, the Golan Heights, made it officially Israel. Does Syria accept it? No. Does the entire world accept it? No. I'm sure you guys have no problem with that, but again, for this analysis, this is what it is. Jerusalem in 1980, we actually passed a law in the Knesset, a basic law of Jerusalem, in fact, annexing East Jerusalem, making it one city, and even deciding that we're not allowed to give pieces of Jerusalem away unless, of course, it's a majority decision or something. So those were annexations that were done. Judea and Samaria, once in a while, the issue is brought up and then taken off the table for various reasons. And even here, what is annexation? What part of it? I'm sure we'll discuss this later on, but this is where we come to today when we have the American Peace Plan or the comprehensive, whatever they call it. Let me see. Peace to Prosperity. This comprehensive plan that was forged between Israel and the United States, kept a secret for a long time. And then one day they exposed it to us. And in general, what does it say? It says the Palestinians will have a country. I think it's called a state, even though it is really a secluded entity surrounded from all areas by Israel, of course, controlled militarily by Israel. And of course, this was done unilaterally and with the Americans, and the Palestinians weren't part of it. The idea of the plan was that now that it has been given to us, we should negotiate with the Palestinians and move forward. Then happened an amazing thing. As soon as the plan was given, Israelis said, that's it, it's ours. It's legal now. We're going to push forward with annexation. There was a point where even between the Israelis and the Americans, there was a big misunderstanding. We were taking it a bit two steps forward. They tried to take us 2 steps back. Right now, what's happening is that there is an understanding by the Americans that we can move forward with actually extending sovereignty, and that's another term for annexation. I'll be glad to discuss this, but extend sovereignty to pieces or parts of Judea and Samaria that are supposed to be part of Israel in the peace plan, assuming that one day when we get there, anyway, that's going to be ours. What is this? What is this portion? What does the map look like? Extremely difficult because it was a very vague map. And now there are teams on the ground, Americans and Israeli, actually working the map and drawing the lines to see what these areas are that the Americans will be able to agree that we extend sovereignty. Vague? Yeah, absolutely. I'm having a very difficult time myself figuring it out, but hopefully today we can try to figure it out a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the plan itself, and you mentioned, the Palestinians' role in that plan, there were obviously several different aspects of the plan proposed, a lot of them discounted, but nearly all of them seem to at least allude to a disastrous outcome for a Palestinian state. You've obviously got 3 major plans proposed. One of them involves the annexation of the entirety of Area C, which includes, the settlements in the Jordan Valley. A second one, which, talks about annexation of just the Jordan Valley, and then another which annexes the major settlement blocks within the area. Do you think that any of these 3 or all of these 3, how do you see the possibility of a future Palestinian state with these 3 kind of plans on the table?
Mm-hmm. Well, when we say Palestinian state, this in itself is an extremely difficult issue. The right-wing parties in Israel still say to this day there will be no Palestinian state. And it's very interesting because we would expect what we call in Israel the right-wing parties, of course, to be very happy with the peace plan being made by Israel and the United States, realizing all of Israel's dreams in a way. The annexation, certainly, if you live in Judea and Samaria, if you're a right-wing party, shouldn't this be really promoting everything you always pushed for and dreamed for? Yet we have some of the settlement leaders themselves and right-wing parties opposing this, because part of it actually uses the term Palestinian state, and they object to it. Now, throughout the years, we've seen the term two-state solution. Even Netanyahu himself, in a famous speech in Bar Ilan University several years ago, acknowledged the idea of a two-state solution, but then has not discussed it anymore. So still to this day, the question is a Palestinian state, okay, a sovereign, viable Palestinian state, part of the Israeli strategy? Again, unfortunately, I can't hop onto the government website and see what their grand strategy is. But if I have to guess, then the secret vision or the secret strategic plan of the right-wing leadership today is that time is on our side. And since the Palestinians make all the mistakes that they've been making in of course, the way they fight us and their worldwide diplomacy, simply making mistake after mistake after mistake, when they could have had a Palestinian state by now, by the way, time is on our side. And the more we draw this out, the more this will distance their dream of a state. Now, when I read the American plan, I read it very carefully. Maybe it's called a state. I don't even see it as a state. I see it as an invented entity called a state. But certainly, again, I want to say this very carefully because I'm not trying to promote the Palestinian agenda, but I understand the Palestinians when they read out and they say, this is not exactly the state we dreamed of, okay? Can we have an army and an airport? No. Now I want to skip to the really military strategic aspect of it and tell you my personal opinion. And that is that Route 6, and I know all of you have been here. So Route 6, where, the green line, the armistice line of 49, you can call it the green line or 67, whatever you want. To have an enemy state beyond that line, of course, does make sense. And I'll even say it's never going to happen. That's why whatever we invent together with the Palestinians, and I only wish good for my Palestinian neighbors, and I hope we do come to some kind of agreement and that we'll be able to be very creative, but there will never be a separate entity that can flip and be opposed to Israel and fight us militarily. A very important thing, unfortunately, we're speaking now in this forum, we're not standing over a map or a sandbox, but the topography is such that when you're in Judea and Samaria, you're on the high ground, you control Tel Aviv, you control the plains. This strategically is something you can never relinquish. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. The Jordan Valley, and again, this is not politics. I myself am not right or left. I've never been. Jordan Valley strategically is our strategic depth. We cannot give it up. There's just no way. It's never going to happen. So if you hear political debates and disputes and in Israel, it can get pretty heightened debate. Still, bottom line, we have to see it as it is, and there are key assets that we will not be able to give up. So you were talking about various components of the plan as we're guessing it may be. Whatever it is, the Jordan Valley is a strategic asset. Maintaining superiority of air and defense will be always in Israel. As for the specific components, is it Area C? Is it Jordan River and the northern part of the Dead Sea? Or just extending sovereignty for the big blocks and the settlements themselves? That's almost a political issue. I feel like the Israeli politicians, once they moved this thing forward and built a very high expectation, now in a way they have to deliver. And even though it's very problematic for them, it's not a coincidence that this just disappeared off the table. We were all waiting for July 1st. It never happened.
Yep.
But I think they need to deliver somehow. And it could be that when it happens, it will be delivering with one of these components just to show here we did something, we didn't take everything that we promised back.
Yeah. It's interesting that you raise the idea that, something is going to happen now, or most likely will happen. Because we've obviously seen a lot of talk coming from, Netanyahu and Gantz both have alluded to potentially raising an annexation legislation in the Knesset. But the US have now raised some concerns about the overall plan and the way that Israel are going about it, and seem to have put their own support of the plan on hold. And as such, kind of annexation as an actual piece of legislation in the Knesset has also been put on hold. Why do you think that is? Why do you think the US have sort of pulled a lot of their support, and why do you think there doesn't seem to be an agreement between Gantz and Netanyahu and other legislators?
I think I hinted to this before, and I apologize, but I personally cannot take the US administration very seriously because of the current leadership. I'm sorry, we shouldn't take it very, shouldn't elaborate on this too much, but I think the current administration will do whatever seems right to them at the time that promotes American interests, okay, as they see it now. There are the political considerations in the United States. There are the political considerations here in Israel. And by the way, saying that politicians have political considerations is not saying something bad about them. They're simply being politicians. We have the US elections coming up. As I said before, I think if my observation is correct, something happened. There was some kind of misunderstanding between Israelis and Americans as far as what the peace plan meant when it relates to annexation. Mm-hmm. So I think here the Americans needed to pull us back a bit. They were saying like, whoa,
yeah,
if you want to play it by our rules, you're going to ruin it. Please do what we said. We, of course, have COVID now that's extremely important. Let's think about this logically. Why does it make sense to deal with something that waited for decades, that even as far as implementation, come on, extending sovereignty for the settlements right now, what will that change on the ground? It won't change anything. As far as the negative ramifications, by the way, if you want to discuss this later, we can. But what are the bad things that can happen? A lot of bad things can happen. This is an interesting discussion in itself because as an Israeli, I can never shy away from doing something that I believe is right in fear of what the other side may do to me. If this were the case, I wouldn't even live in Israel, okay? I mean, I'd live in Canada or in Australia. So when you think strategy and long term, of course you have to take risks. Right now, I believe it's a mistake because we have bigger things on our plate. We're all in lockdown. People are dying as we speak from COVID. We have to fight the economic battle together with our Palestinians neighbors, by the way. So annexation, I don't think, is the most important thing to deal with right now.
Yeah. That might bring us to our next question nicely, which is, what does it look like on the ground in terms of Israeli, support, not from a legislative perspective, but just from the average person, living in Israel? What are they saying and feeling about the issue of annexation at the moment?
Good point. Unfortunately, we live in a day and age that your opinions many times are biased and they are shaped according to the political party that you usually support. My American background brings me usually to talk about my friends in the United States, that their opinions on everything goes according to the, if they are this side or that side of the aisle.
Yeah.
In Israel, that's many times the case. So, I mean, naturally, you're not going to see a Likud member that supports Bibi saying, hey, I think that was a terrible mistake on Bibi's part. Usually it will be everything Bibi does is smart and vice versa. That's just the way we humans are, unfortunately. As I said before, surprisingly, it doesn't go according to this regular logic when it comes to annexation, because the extreme right, and when I say extreme, I don't mean that in a negative way, but of course in the political map as we see it, those that believe that this is our land from the river to the sea, it's our historic homeland. They have nothing to do here. They invented their narrative of Palestinian people that never existed. It's ours. We should annex it all, period. If you believe that, of course, you're against annexation of bits and pieces that still are tie into a plan that leads to a Palestinian state, which I see as a strategic threat to Israel. So there's this wide range now, but it's a multi-dimensional map because it's not only right and left and do it or not do it, but do it now or not do it now, or go all the way or don't go all the way. So I would just say it's individual. It's the least of other things automatic. I can't even give you the percentage of how it distributes today.
Mm-hmm. So I guess moving from there, and it's probably going to be a tougher question to answer, but what has been, I guess, the Palestinian response so far to the proposed plans?
That was a sigh there. I wasn't trying to waste time, but the Palestinians have an agenda, and we have to understand they are a nation that have strategic calculations, national aspirations that have not been realized. I think they themselves understand that they have been making foolish mistakes throughout history, and right now, I think what they're doing is they're playing the strategic game and relatively wisely, rejecting completely the peace plan of the Americans and threatening, when it comes to annexation, threatening in a way that almost makes it like there's no way back. For instance, we've heard from Palestinian leadership, if you go ahead with annexation, we're dismantling the Palestinian Authority. Now, dismantling the Palestinian Authority to Israel should be a serious threat, because since the Oslo Accord, that many Israelis say the Oslo Accord, was a mistake and it died anyway. I personally don't believe that that's the case. I believe that the Oslo Accord created a situation on the ground that made the place relatively stable. And we and the Palestinians were able to sustain the situation and move forward in many aspects. But remember that in a Palestinian calculation, they are in a deadlock. Why? Because the more the situation is stable, for instance, the more we have mutual plans and establish electricity power plants, and the more medicine becomes good in Judea and Samaria. What does this mean? This means for the Palestinian state that the situation is good. They can't admit the situation is good. In a way, their calculation is that things should be bad so they can prove that Israel is the evil entity that's not giving them sovereignty. By the way, Gaza is an extreme situation of this, because the people of Gaza are oppressed by a terror organization that their interest is that their lives will be miserable so they can tell the world, that this has been brought about by the evil Israelis. Judea and Samaria is more complex, but when it comes to annexation, listen to this threat. It's not going to happen. We're going to dismantle the Palestinian Authority. We're going to cease all coordination and security coordination with Israel, which is superb, by the way. Many people don't understand that we collaborate on a day-to-day basis in maintaining security and stability on the ground. So when they say we're going to break all ties, now, the truth is, I believe they're bluffing in a lot of this, because what are they going to do? The Palestinian leadership that has been given so much as far as self-sustainment and the ability, and let's maybe not get into it too much, but I think the personal lives of the Palestinian leadership in the last few decades has not been so bad, okay? I don't think they're going to want to relinquish all their authority and go back to what they've been before. So I think some of it is bluffing, but remember what I said before. They have strategic calculations. They're playing this mind game and calculating their steps and their messages. I just explained to you why I think they're doing it relatively wisely. Does this mean that we have to be afraid of what they say and do something because they said it? Absolutely not. And now in this discussion, we're trying to figure out what is the right thing to do.
Absolutely. I'm wondering if you can speak more to the point you just made about the collaboration between Palestinian leadership and Israel, because it's something I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand. You've obviously got a necessity for a very strong relationship in terms of managing the region between the two different groups. And I think that for a lot of people, they see them as completely separate and never really interacting. So if you could maybe discuss that a bit and give people a bit of an insight into what it actually looks like.
The problem many times, and by the way, I'm not talking about you and us, but other nations of the world that look at this region, see it many times as, there's this clash between the Jews and the Arabs, generally speaking. They occupied this land, the ancestral homeland of the ancient Palestinian people. Of course, I'm joking. And the Palestinians are trying to promote these narratives in, on a day-to-day basis in their international diplomacy. So as I said before, they have a challenge of how do they promote stability and at the same time try to promote their agenda around the world. And that's a serious problem for them. A typical Western mistake that I strongly recommend that you do not make is to believe that we are all human beings. After all, what do we want? prosperity, a good education for our kids, right? A better future for our kids than we had. And this means that if we have a good, stable economy and if we have jobs and good education, we'll all be happy. Maybe this is the solution for peace in the Middle East. Not so fast. Remember that I told you before, I have a lot of respect for my Palestinian neighbors. Just like we have our strategic long-term calculations, when we started the Zionist movement in the 19th century, was it easy? Was coming here easy? Was fighting all these wars easy? It's never easy, right? But we're not choosing the easy course. So we ourselves are not living by this Western model. Why do we think that they are? They also are strategic, long-term thinking. They're willing to suffer for their cause. So it's a mistake to think that if only in Judea and Samaria, things will be good financially and they'll have stability and more schools and better hospitals, then this stability will bring peace. Many people make this mistake. I totally disagree with this. Still on the ground, the Palestinian leadership, they are leaders. They have their people. They hear the plight of their people. They see the challenges. And yes, they promote what is good for their interests, which for the last 3 decades has been stability. So we work together on water, and because we're living in the same land. Remember, we love the same land, love the same olive trees, and we share so much. We're still going to be living side by side, hopefully for generations. So they understand that too. So they always have this challenge. As far as security, it's the most amazing because many people are surprised by this. So just to generally answer your question, we have teams working together on the ground, maintaining stability, fighting terrorism, which means sharing information, actually thwarting terror attacks by the Palestinian Authority. And this is, I think, is a mutual interest that so far has been mutually realized in a relatively successful manner. Just look at our recent history. Think of what we used to go through in the past. Still, many, many terrorist activities are thwarted. So we can't make the mistake of just counting, what's happening on the ground and saying, oh, everything's wonderful. No, everything's not exactly wonderful because we're constantly mowing the grass and enabling this relative calm. Okay, so it's not perfect and it's unsustainable. Don't think we can just live like this for another 100 years and everything's going to be wonderful. That's why this issue is still very complex.
Definitely. From here, I think we're going to jump into some questions and a bit of a discussion about, what are the actual ramifications of annexation going forward. But I think before we do that, I might jump back to a point you made earlier, which is, everyone, both in Israel and around the world, were waiting for July 1st, and July 1st has come and gone. And I guess from here, people are wondering, when will annexation actually happen now? You obviously mentioned that the coronavirus situation is being dealt with, and that is taking precedent. But, Netanyahu and Gantz have formed what looks to be a relatively shaky coalition, and things are slowly happening. But when do you think movements are now going to be made in this space?
Well, this is a wild guess, and my wild guess is that it's not going to happen in the recent future. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, if we go to another round of elections in Israel, and maybe even today we'll find out, I think Netanyahu will pull that card again, saying, it didn't work out, but we had COVID and everything. But I think that's going to be part of his platform. So as far as rhetoric, I think soon it's going to be brought up again. I personally find it hard to imagine that any reasonable and responsible leader will bring up such an issue now with so many negative ramifications that can erupt. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to imagine that happens. That's why my guess is that we're not going to see it happen in the near future. It's not like tomorrow morning we're going to wake up and Ma'ale Adumim or the Jordan Valley has been annexed. Mm-hmm. It's almost like I hope. It's not only that I'm guessing, it's that I hope it does not happen.
Yeah. So moving into some of the questions, I guess, about what annexation is actually going to look like. We'll start off with one that's probably a bit complex and a bit difficult, but what do you see? What do you see as, I guess, the top few real ramifications of annexation long term? First, we'll look at it in terms of the ramifications for Israel, and then we'll move on to ramifications for the Palestinians.
Okay, well, the interesting part is that a lot of these annexation plans really mean nothing on the ground. Think about it. Let's say we annex all the settlements. And what do I mean by that? Extending sovereignty for all settlements. That means that on the ground, nothing happens. But this strange situation that we have today, that there's military law in Judea and Samaria, but all these enclaves that are the Jewish settlements, in them we have, in a way, the Israeli law relevant for Israeli citizens. So if an Israeli citizen commits a crime, of course, he's not judged in a military court, but he's judged by Israeli law. So this is this strange dual system that we have in place now. So in a way, extending sovereignty will only solve that, because if settlements are now an integral part of Israel, that means that we break away from that old system. And if you live in a settlement in Judea and Samaria, if you live in Ariel, or even right nearby to where I live in Modi'in Illit, suddenly there's no difference between that and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Herzliya. So that would make things easier legally, would not change anything on the ground, and everything's wonderful. When I talked about the Jordan Valley, remember, no, we're not talking about switching land, displacing people, nothing of the sort. So what is the issue then? Maybe that's if we extend sovereignties to some areas like Area C, and there are 80,000, the number's different, but let's say there are 80,000 Palestinians that happen to reside on those pieces of land that are annexed, then there'll be the question, what is their status? Now, of course, it could be that they become residents of this area. It could be that they are offered Israeli citizenship and that some will agree and many will decline. I believe many will decline, because it will be like admitting, pledging allegiance to this country that for them is the enemy state. So in truth, I'm saying no difference. Some of it even only makes it easier. So the ramifications are only short-term as far as the response planned by the Palestinian Authority, and sporadic, just erupting by the people thinking that a terrible thing happened to them.
Yeah. You mentioned there about, I guess, what would happen to the Palestinians in areas that may potentially be annexed. It's something that's probably been kept even more hidden away than, the annexation plan itself, is what is actually going to happen to any Palestinians that do live in those areas. Why do you think that the government and Netanyahu have not been willing to kind of acknowledge that issue?
I think because it's difficult. And I think because there are international legal aspects that are so sensitive that we're trying to figure out what to do. Now, again, I have to be very honest with you and tell you that as an Israeli, I'm extremely concerned about bringing about a situation that could portray us as an apartheid state. Now, we are so, Israelis at least, we're so used to false accusations, being called all these names and terms. There are people that now call Israel an apartheid state, which is totally ridiculous. So we're so used to saying, ridiculous, absurd, anti-Semites. But as an Israeli, I must be very careful that anything that I do does not bring about a situation that does bring me legally closer to a situation where there are people with no rights. As we speak now, the Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria are living in a disputed area under military rule, and we all understand that it's an interim situation because the dispute has not been settled. What happens if we move forward with annexation and in a way say, okay, that's it. This is the final settled. This is Israel. But here are 20,000 people with no rights, with no passport. They can't vote. They can't even travel abroad. Of course, such a thing would be much more complex, which is why I urge our leadership to make sure that any plan that we reach always has to look at this aspect. So if you ask me as an Israeli, since I have so many good Israeli friends that are Israeli Arabs, if we have another 80,000 Palestinians that become Israelis, I personally would be very happy. I'm just explaining why I think the issue is sensitive, and not that I have the final answer for how to implement it. I'm just saying this is an issue that we have to be very careful with and do the right thing.
I think it leads well into another question that was asked, which is essentially, how important is the PR battle when it comes to this issue? Obviously, we've seen in the past that, Israel isn't one to shy away from that battle. And, in issues in the Gaza Strip and with rockets being fired, they're more than willing to potentially lose that battle in order to save Israeli lives or protect the country. But on annexation, how important is the PR aspect?
Interesting point, because I believe we live now in an age, and I think Trump brought this age into being, that leadership is less and less caring about what it will look like. It doesn't look like the U.S. president, cares when he decides something or said something, so it's like he says, okay, so I'll be criticized. Who cares? I'm the president of the United States. I'll do whatever I want. And you can see that he moved forward with some aspects of Israel, like moving the embassy to Jerusalem and extending sovereignty to the Golan Heights.
Yep.
That he did things that were perceived in Israel as a positive thing, mainly by the right. And I think I can, at least I notice in our leadership, I don't know what about Australian, it's like 2020 is the age where leaders, can be just more outspoken, less politically correct, in a way going back in that aspect. Now, as far as PR, you call it PR, and you say that we don't shy away from that war, but we usually lose that war.
Yeah.
We're terrible in that war. And one of the reasons is maybe because we're not very talented in this issue, and we focus more on doing and less on explaining ourselves, but also because the issues themselves are complex. They are challenging. Just like we discussed now with the Palestinians, when we go ahead with something and we even offer citizenship, and 10,000 Palestinians say, no, we don't want your citizenship. And then 2 days later, they say, apartheid, we don't have rights. Probably that's going to be the headline in the New York Times, right? And not Israel offered citizenship and they declined. But just to answer your question, I think we always have to be on the PR front, but not focus on the PR aspect, but do the right thing. We fight this way, by the way. The IDF fights morally, and we invest a lot of energy in doing the right thing and fighting the right things, upholding our, very strict code of conduct. And I think this has to be done also in our diplomacy, also in relations to our Palestinian neighbors. And when you do the right thing and when you maintain your values, then to explain it in a way is easier, because you say what you did, you say why you did it, you explain the reasoning behind it. And if still someone throws something at your face and calls you names, what can you do? It is what it is. This whole issue, by the way, of this 100-year conflict is something that I think it's hard for the human mind to grasp. And I think I opened with this. History takes its course. Things are not as easy as they seem. Narratives have been invented mostly by the Palestinian side that have been adopted by the world, and they're totally false. Still, as an Israeli, I will play along in a way because they are here. They are my neighbors. I respect them. I must respect them, by the way, if I ever want stability. So it's not that I'm buying into all the narratives, but I am respecting my partner and hoping that we can negotiate and reach some kind of agreement.
Mm-hmm. One of the big questions currently being raised is, what is it that the Israeli government is really seeking out of the position of annexation? There's obviously been a lot of contention inside Israel, outside Israel, about the actual gains that Israel seek. A lot of military leaders inside and outside of Israel have raised concerns about what kind of response there's going to be to annexation and whether that poses a significant military risk. Geographic, political kind of experts have said that there isn't really that much that's going to be gained from it. What is Israel looking for?
I don't know. That was my short answer. My longer answer is that I think that when you look at the annexation of the Golan Heights and East Jerusalem, you can see why such an act that is perceived when it's done as challenging, as threatening, as dangerous as far as short-term ramifications, you can see why maybe 2 decades later, it's something that sets something, that changes things on the ground permanently. And that 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, it becomes reality that everyone's used to. Yeah. So I can understand the logic that's saying we have to push forward slowly, incrementally, with moves such as annexation, for instance, the Jordan Valley. Why? Because it's impossible that so far many people in the world continue to dream as if this someday is going to belong to the Palestinians or the Jordanians. Maybe it's time that we set something in stone. And so 20 years from now, people can stop arguing about this ridiculous issue because it's ours and it's always going to be ours. So when you ask me, what do they wish to gain? And forget the short term, because the short term is dangerous. We could have a war. We could have another intifada. We could lose lives, many lives. But the question of long-term gain, I can understand the logic that argues, yes, that the long-term vision, okay, of maintaining the Israeli settlements in Judea and Samaria can be promoted, can be stabilized by annexation. I want to say something very important. I don't think we said this so far. For years, the debate in Israel between right and left was, I'm very, very generally speaking, the right are for settlements, the left are for dismantling settlements and having a Palestinian state after all the settlements have been evacuated. Notice what happened. The year is 2020. In a way, we all understand now that that's not going to happen. Listen, this is an amazing thing. I think it's clear to us now that nobody is going anywhere. Most of the settlements are staying where they are. Most of the Palestinians are staying where they are. After the disengagement in 2005, after disengagement from the Gaza Strip, I think it's even clear in the right-wing side of the Israeli map that no more is an Israeli government going to evacuate big pieces of land, send tens of thousands of people out of their homes, and it'll be okay. In a way, and again, this is just my estimation. Please be very careful with what I say. My estimation is that there is a stronger feeling now that such a thing is not going to happen again. So anything we discuss now as far as annexation, Palestinian state, it will always be working around the settlements as they are. Certainly the settlement blocks. I mean, don't even think about it. Gush Etzion, the Etzion block south of Jerusalem, Ma'ale Adumim, Ariel, all these settlements, they are going to be there forever. Most of the big settlements are not going anywhere. Maybe there will be a discussion about small outposts, but really not more than that. So just think, this changed our whole perspective as far as what are even the variables in this equation.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very clear that someone could believe that annexation is just fixing a few more of these variables and promoting the long-term goal.
You've kind of answered another question we've had, which is really what does annexation do to the debate around Israel and around its sovereignty? And I think you've pointed out very clearly there that there are certain aspects that have always been debatable, and this is potentially a step towards those no longer being a major kind of player or component of those debates. My next question is about kind of what the next step is on the ground, and I know we've spoken briefly about what's going to happen next or what you foresee as the timeline, but realistically, a lot of questions we've had surround what does annexation realistically look like on the ground? Is it a mobilization of troops into these areas? Is it building of walls? I think there's a lot of confusion around what it actually looks like.
Okay. Good point. First, we have to point out, and I'm saying this in a way in criticism of the government, that we approached July 1st thinking it's going to happen without the military even knowing what the plan is. So you would think that you and I discussing this on the internet, but the government, and all the military and the agencies, they probably all have it worked out. The military didn't know. And in a way, they were waiting for something to happen, understanding that something could erupt, and they were doing their own calculations, just because they are a professional organization. Certainly now, if the government plans to move forward with anything, it will have to be done better. That means they'll have to let them in on the secret and have it pre-planned. Certainly, it will be deploying forces and preparing for what may happen, what may erupt, because it's pretty clear to all of us that the short-term ramifications will be negative. There will be violence, okay? But remember, from what I said before, that all the changes we'll be seeing will be only us preparing to counter whatever uprising or whatever countermeasures the Palestinian side will show us. It's not changing anything on the ground. We will not see an Israeli declaration that suddenly moves in or pulls out of anything. On the ground, nothing will change.
Yeah.
In a way, it even shows us how ridiculous this idea is of doing something that changes nothing on the ground. It's actually only rhetoric and some legal aspects, mostly bolstering nationalistic feelings, ego, political considerations, etc. But even though it changes nothing, it may have serious ramifications on the ground for weeks and months, and may even divert Israeli attention from other serious challenges like Iran in the northern arena. And we may find ourselves clashing for a whole year in Judea and Samaria. But again, these are just calculations, and I don't want to sound weak. I'm not saying that the bottom line of the Israeli government must be, to avoid at all costs this ramification that I just discussed.
Mm. It's an interesting point that you've raised there, because obviously, after Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, the response from a Palestinian perspective was to clash with the Israelis, and the PR battle in that space was, in my opinion, well and truly lost. The headline on nearly every major paper was about civilians and medical people on the ground being killed. You've raised a very big point there, which is that you potentially foresee a clash that could last weeks, months, potentially even a year. Is that something that Israelis understand and have prepared for?
Oh, I think it's clear to any Israeli that analyzes the situation that the immediate consequences could be difficult and that lives will be lost. But again, the issue comes down to the question, is the long-term vision worth it? Are the long-term benefits that we can gain from this nationally, are they worth it? And that each and every Israeli will have his own answer. My answer right now is that this is not the time to do it, because of other considerations. It's not that I'm afraid of a challenge. So I know it's hard to answer this question, but by the way, about the embassy, you were talking about the negative ramifications there. I would say that was relatively easy. That means the US president decided to do it. He did it. So there was some noise on the Palestinian side. Some things happened here and there, but ultimately we may learn the lesson from that you want to do it, you do it. And what happens? Nothing. And in a way, I'm just trying to, this is not my opinion. I'm just trying to explain the opinion that says, you see, you have to have resolve. You have to be strong. You have to do what's right. And that's it. And move forward with it. And the stronger you are, especially in the Middle East, the more you'll be respected, and the more you will succeed. I'm not sure that we are able to learn from the example of the embassy to what's going to happen with annexation. Annexation may give the Palestinians the idea that this is actually once and for all taking away their dream of sovereignty. And by the way, huge mistake. To my Palestinian neighbors, I want to say, even if sovereignty is extended to settlements as they are, remember, it's just a word game. It's just an issue of the legal aspects for Israelis living in those settlements. It means nothing about long-term negotiation. I'll even say more than that. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem was celebrated in Israel. I think this was an invented narrative, as if Trump gave us Jerusalem. He even said, the Jerusalem, the United Jerusalem. So what? So the American president said, what does that mean? It means nothing. Someday there could be a negotiated peace with the Palestinians, and they will have their capital in East Jerusalem. It means nothing. I think that any annexation, all the options we discussed today, none of them actually sever the possibility of a future peace plan or peace deal with the Palestinians. That's why I hope, even if we go forward with something like this, the Palestinians will be able to take it in perspective and not overreact. Unfortunately, they will do whatever they think is right that will promote their own calculations.
Well, as you've just said, though, the narrative is obviously clearly very important. And as you've said, there is the potential that the narrative becomes that Israel is stripping the Palestinians of their chance at having a nation of their own. To me, hearing that sounds like a very large motivation for responding to those moves in a negative fashion. It seems to me as though, and I agree with you in your response to the issue of the embassy moving, but this seems like it could be a whole lot bigger than that. And as well, you mentioned the fact that it may distract the Israelis from areas that their attention needs to be on, like Iran. How big do you think that this could be?
hard to predict. I think the Middle East teaches us that when something ignites, when you have one spark, by the way, looking at Lebanon now, you understand that very physically, because one spark leads to one fire that leads to a huge explosion. We've seen this throughout the Middle East and the Arab Spring, that you can never predict. You can never know what one act of one person will lead to, and then larger riots, bringing people to the street. I think there's no formula that can help you to calculate where things can lead to. It's not like I want to give ideas to my Palestinian neighbors, but theoretically, if the Palestinian people feel like we have, after so many years of maybe some clinging to some hope, if they feel that we are now killing their dreams, who knows? This could be another intifada. Intifada means, and by the way, let's also make this very clear. It would be another stupid mistake on the part of the Palestinians, like all the stupid mistakes they've been making throughout history, okay? Because violence will lead nowhere. We are strong. We are resilient. Even if they go and try to do something, even if they have, so-called organized riots or lone wolf attacks or whatever, we will thwart it like we always did. We'll be strong before it. We'll be strong through it. We'll be strong after it. I don't think these things scare us or make us change our strategic calculations. I'm just saying, from a human being perspective, from an all human being perspective, it would be a big waste if we do something that is more declarative, that does not kill their dreams, does not take off the table any future negotiation, and that they take that from there to ruin everything that they have established, and actually will take them back and will make it almost impossible for them to establish a viable state or entity or whatever they someday may accomplish. Remember, by the way, another important thing. I think they're used to having the world on their side and having the Arab world on their side. If you ask me, the Arab world cares about them less and less. You're going to have a ring there for a few seconds. Sorry about that. You're going to see the Arab world cares about them less and less, is more concerned about Iran and strategic Middle Eastern calculations. I think a lot of it, of supporting the Palestinians, is just trying to show solidarity and that kind of rhetoric. But in a way, if they do something foolish, I think more than the past, there are going to be those entities and countries in the Middle East that will tell them that they're doing something foolish. I hope they will be able to be more calculated and more wise, and that, again, ultimately we move forward. Remember that the Israeli current leadership, the Palestinian current leadership is not going to be here forever. Okay, we are human beings. I will say this again. The United States, by the way, soon there will be elections, but their system is such that even if Trump is president again, after the next term will not be President Trump. We move on. History moves on. The region is here. The people are here. And I hope we can be wiser than we were in the past.
Moving to, I guess, we've got time for a few more questions. So I might shift to, I guess, the relationship between the issue of annexation and politics in Israel currently. A lot of people out there now are seeing that there's the potential that annexation as an issue was used as somewhat of a political football to distract from some of the other issues that have been plaguing Israel right now. Obviously, you don't need to look far to see the protests that are happening all throughout Israel right now, whether it be about the state of the economy, whether it be about the government's response to coronavirus, whether it be about, Bibi Netanyahu and the trial that's currently ongoing. I think that for a lot of people, they're kind of believing now that the issue of annexation was used as a way to distract from those issues. What do you say to those people?
This again will go to where you are on the political map in Israel or anywhere. And certainly, I mean, it's a fact that it was used as a political card because the timing that these issues were raised was always right before the elections. So you can call it maybe an attempt of distraction. I will more say it was a means to call out to the base, to the political base, and bring them on board, saying, if you just elect me, I will promote the things that are most important to you.
Mm.
And just think how powerful that is when Bibi Netanyahu tells his political base, vote for me, I'm going to give you your dream. I'm going to annex the Jordan Valley. So I think certainly this was a political tool. But again, remember that I'm not saying that, all leaders in the world have only national interests in their heart, and Bibi Netanyahu is a politician. All politicians are politicians. As far as the demonstrations we see now in Israel, so you will see, of course, depends where you are, you'll see those that are going out to the street and really calling out in despair, if it's a personal financial despair, or politically believing that our leadership is corrupt and Netanyahu shouldn't even be a prime minister, being indicted and all that. And of course, Netanyahu supporters and right-wing supporters that will almost, look baffled at these demonstrators and say, you guys must be crazy. This is a democracy. We elected Netanyahu. What are you trying to do? Overthrow an elected government? So the political spectrum is so wide. I don't think it's wise, by the way, that I tell you where I am exactly on the spectrum personally. I more try to understand it all, but yes, I will certainly say that the issue of annexation has been used politically, will be used politically. Even taking it off the table in a way is a political consideration. Okay, not in a negative way. Again, a political consideration of a political leader that sees what he has, the challenges that he has right now, and understands what is wise or not wise to do at the time and how to do it. And even when it is implemented, if it is implemented, even that will be done in a calculated manner, choosing one of the options that we discussed today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to jump on one of your final comments there to answer our final question, which is, there's every chance that Israel goes to another election very soon. What kind of role do you think the issue of annexation is going to play if Israel does go to another election?
Well, first, I hope Israel does not go to another election. I think it's shameful that we're even discussing that option. We have a unity government that was established under the flag of, fighting Corona together as an extreme measure, put everything aside, nothing else is important. And suddenly now, because of I think an invented debate over having a budget for 1 year or 2 years, we may be going to elections again. And unfortunately, there you see the political considerations. Yeah. If we do go to elections, in a way, it will be reshuffling the whole political map in Israel, because many people, including myself, are fed up with the situation. It's almost like you have a feeling, I'm not going to vote for them again. I'm staying home. And then democracy kicks in and you say, no, I have to go and vote. But rethinking, recalibrating, all my thinking as far as who did what in the last year, and maybe reconsidering. So I think that is one possibility. But always we have to remember that, because of what I discussed before, right wing, left wing, most Netanyahu supporters will stay Netanyahu supporters. By the way, most of those people that believe that Netanyahu is corrupt and should go to jail will still think that. And all the people that think that these cases have been made up against him and he did nothing and he's being discriminated against, and this is just an attempt by the left to overthrow him, they will still think that. And those will still be the main issues. You asked me about annexation. Absolutely, no doubt that all candidates going into the next elections will have to address this in their platform. We will see, again, declarations and promises. I learned as an Israeli that this almost means nothing. That's our experience. Come on. They'll say what they do. That doesn't mean anything about what they will do. And also remember what I told you before, that when we have an Israeli politician that declares, I have a 10-step plan, and then you go on the website, maybe you'll see 10 bullets on a PowerPoint slide, but it's not really a strategic plan that was built for 3 months with all the ramifications worked out. It's more a general declaration. So it will play a part, but maybe in a shallow way. Just remember that we don't know, as we speak, American and Israeli teams working on the ground, drawing maps, making calculations and plans. We don't know exactly what they're doing. We don't know when they're going to release it. Maybe we will have to see what happens with the Israeli elections, the American elections, and then only after that they will recalculate and move forward with whatever they want to do.
I think that's a beautiful place to finish. We're just about to tip over the hour mark. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you for taking the time to speak with me and everyone here, in Victoria, because it's been an incredibly enlightful discussion. And I hope that everyone got a lot out of it. So a massive thank you to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Right. And always, as always, a massive thank you to all of the sponsors that help make all of the programs and initiatives that we run possible. So yeah, that's really it. If you have any final remarks, you can say them now. But yeah, that was an amazing discussion. So thank you.
Well, no. Just my final remark is thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor. We're brothers and sisters, of course. Can't wait to see you here. Can't wait to come and visit you there. And really, just thank you very much. It was an honor.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Shalom.